Hi, I'm Craig.
And I'm Gina.
We are the founders of Blended Together Forever.
We started this podcast to give hope and encouragement to blended families. We want to just take a little time to share some of our stories with you.
So, honey, we're going to talk about sibling rivalry today. Let's talk about what it is, especially in a nuclear family, it's natural to have something, but in a blended family,
Right.
there's other things about rivalry. So, once you start, and then we'll talk about some key points.
It's a little different. Yeah.
Yep.
Sometimes I think the kids are a little uncomfortable. They're not sure where their place is, especially when you factor in the birth order and who's oldest now. You might have been the oldest, at one point, and then in a blended family, you might not be the oldest. You may be the middle child.
Right.
So there's a little confusion on who's the boss. And one story that comes to my mind, and it kind of takes you, and you're not really sure how to handle some of these things. Just getting in the Suburban to go somewhere with all 7 kids. Well, one of ours that was the oldest got in the car, and we had a child that was older than him come out and say, "No, you're in the back. I'm the oldest."
Right.
So I can see where the birth order kind of puts a little confusion.
And that was your biological oldest and my biological oldest.
Exactly.
And but yours was older than mine. So that's like why he should have been in the front seat.
Right.
But that was different for my child. So yeah, it's a good point. It's a great point. It takes time, doesn't it?
It does take time.
I mean, you don't want to rush in and have all these rules and regulations and, why is time such a big deal? And why is a pace that you kind of let the kids have a say so in this transition?
I think going back, if I had to do over again, I think it would be so important to let the kids sit down with us and have a little bit more ownership in some of these situations.
I agree. Input, because if they own it, it's like if they decided, hey, here's the guidelines, here's and they had input.
Right.
It's their idea, not just mom or dad's idea.
And they really do have good ideas. They think outside the box, and sometimes that's really good.
Right.
Some things that we don't see.
Yeah.
And it does take time, and that was what we didn't factor in. We thought, okay, this is going to mesh and work
quicker, and we needed to have a more realistic say it's going to mesh, but it may take a little bit longer than we anticipated.
Exactly.
Okay. So if time's a big factor in sibling rivalry, consistency would be a big deal also, wouldn't it? Because I can't have a different set of rules for one set of kids versus another set of kids.
Right.
And they'll sense that. They play mom and dad against each other in a nuclear family. Well, they're really going to pit mom and dad. So when I look back, I didn't do that very good at all. I was, as we've said before, I favored mine more out of just some of the stuff that I was going through. But if somebody's watching this or listening to this, let's talk about consistency and how can they get there. I didn't get there. You got there quicker, no doubt, than I did. But that is a big deal. It's got to be an equal. It can't be a disparaging set of guidelines or rules.
Right.
So why is that? How do we get there? How can we get consistent?
Well, first thing, I believe that when you come together and blend, you're already kind of treading on eggshells a little bit as a parent. You're really kind of second guessing some of your ways of disciplining. And in our case, my boys lived with us full time, and yours were in and out. So they, having mine here full time, it's like when your biological kids came over, then it changed a little bit. You were probably easier on them because you didn't see them as much.
Right.
Mine were here all the time, so you were, a little more tough on them.
Right.
So that was the part that we didn't do well. And took time.
Yeah.
We got there. I feel like we got there, but it took a lot of time.
So if we could have gone back, or for anybody again that's watching, if they can have a predetermined course of action, it's important that we had a united front
First,
so we
yes.
give whatever consistency to, because hey, they're together on this.
Right.
So it's really important before involving the kids in the situation.
Right. And we weren't. We weren't always on a united front, and kids are so stinking smart.
Who wasn't on a united front all the time?
I wasn't.
It's her fault.
So,
no, I'm kidding.
And they're smart. They can detect so much. Even when you think you've got them snowed, you do not. And they are good then. That's when they come in and divide and conquer.
Yeah.
So,
sibling rivalry is tough in a nuclear. We didn't have that much.
We really didn't.
But there's other blended families. They may have some real sibling rivalry.
I think ours were so spread apart enough that everybody kind of knew the pecking order.
Right.
So,
right.
And of course, they knew the pecking order when the one girl came in.
Right. So that's the other factor, is that the male, where there were 6 boys in our composition and only 1 girl.
Right.
So she had daddy right here.
Right.
And so she kind of ruled the roost, so to speak.
Right.
Okay.
So when they wanted something, they knew who to go to. Not me, not him. They went to the girl of the family, and if she could buy into what they wanted to do, then she would go and ask Dad, and it was a done deal. It was pretty funny. We would see that happen.
What do you think would be the most common sibling rivalry in a step family or a blended family? Even though we didn't have that much, maybe compared to others, what do you think would be a common pitfall that
I would say in a household where both parents are working full time, it could be for time.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate enough to be able to be home, so I had the time, and we had the time that we could spend individually with each one of them, and we tried to do that well, so they could all have individual time.
And I think we did do that well. When I look back, we made time to kind of date or be with our own and keep that,
But I could see where time would be really tough if both parents are working outside the home.
Another thing in sibling rivalry, and this was personal to me, is that I had built some solid kind of specialness with my own. I remember going to a church camp, and I had a specific Bible verse for my oldest and my second, or my daughter. Right. I didn't have a Bible verse for your kids. They each had a kind of a pet name. And it's like grandparents, that's my angel, that's my whatever. So you got to avoid labels if it's not universal, where everybody, I'm not special because they're the special one. And we see that
Sure.
But if you have a label or a Bible verse, it'd be good that everybody had you're my princess, you're my golden child, you're my little red, you're my angel, right?
Right. Exactly.
How would you and especially that could create some sibling rivalry? Well, you're this and I'm not,
Right. Kind of would make one feel left out.
Right.
Or not special. The baby always has the title of the baby.
Mm-hmm.
And
the spoiled one.
Yes, and that too.
Uh-huh. Or the clown.
Right. We had,
they call the baby the clown.
But I don't know that that's a title that's really positive.
No. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And then there was one called the perfect child.
Uh-huh.
He never did any wrong.
Right.
So labels can they can hurt, or they can make one feel left out if you don't have one for all of them.
I'm glad you said that, Gina, because it reminds me of Matthew 7. Many years ago, the first time I really started thinking about my own words in a deep, 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 meaningful way. Judge not that you aren't judged. And Jesus said in Matthew 12, by your words you'll be justified, but also by your words you're going to be condemned or exposed. And I thought, I need to watch more careful. And then you realize nobody can tame the tongue.
Right.
And if there's emotion in sibling rivalry or between husband and wife trying to corral,
really fuel it.
It's going to fuel it even more. And you'd even heighten that's my child. In other words, there's a label.
Yeah.
That's your child. Well, that's a label. So it can go both good or bad.
Yeah.
But we need to either avoid that in a negative connotation, or if we want to make them feel good, like you're my star student, that's fine for that one. But you're my upcoming artist, or you're, to keep it consistent, right?
Mm-hmm. I think so. I think it's you have to be really careful, and I think they need to be positive. And also,
Absolutely.
I think it's, once again, I think it's a fun group effort. If you're going to do that and have a special pet name or a nickname, first of all, it's got to be positive and
Totally agree.
and encouraging.
Right.
So having one that's labeled the clown might not be a good idea.
Nope.
So,
No.
and having one, the perfect child, might not be a good idea. However, that child likes that. The others
They didn't like
do
that.
not.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So be extra careful on that.
A couple of stories before we wrap up this podcast on sibling rivalry. When one of your boys played baseball, and my oldest played baseball, they were actually in the same league on separate teams.
Right.
So it's just any sporting event, one team wants to beat the other team. When you look back, did you see any heightened rivalry? Because that's your child against my child, and not just in a home under a roof, but actually on a baseball diamond? Or did it kind of play out in your mind?
It kind of played out. You were the coach, though, for your child, so that did make a big difference.
Well, that's true. That's a good point, though. Did that make it worse?
Well, you were already coaching him before we got married.
That's true.
So that wasn't, that's the way that fell.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. Any other thoughts on the sibling rivalry that maybe we haven't hit on that could help anybody that's listening?
Just the point that I made about sharing in the ideas, and sometimes we saw it helped when we let the kids sometimes figure out how to work things out without us jumping in too quick.
Right. So if we, in closing, let's say they're young kids in a household, what would be something that a young set of kids could do? Then maybe if they're older, middle school, high school, let's look at maybe something they could do. And then if they're out of the house, that's something that they could participate in. So a little one could be, we always asked them, where do you want to go to dinner? Because we'd always go out to eat one time per week. And of course, if one specific child wanted to go, which is my daughter, that wanted to go eat someplace, we'd go there. Sometimes. So, but we could let the young kids pick, or at least share in that. What about if they're older? What's something that could defuse sibling rivalry if they're middle school or high school? What kind of activities maybe that would help? Anything come to mind?
Maybe them have their own meeting together and tell us what their resolution is.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. All right.
I had that happen just the other day with my little nieces and nephews visiting.
Right.
They had a little issue. Two of them that were 5. And
Talk about that.
And
that's true.
I said, I want you two to come up with the resolution of how you want to fix this.
What'd they pick?
And that's what they did. They chose to apologize to each other.
Okay.
And not do that again. I said, I like that.
Yeah.
So I wish I'd have done that more when the kids were little, have them come up with some of the ideas and some of the resolutions versus me being, commander in chief.
Right. All right. And then if they're adult children and they're out of the house, or maybe they're already married and they've got their own family, any thoughts on that at all from a sibling rivalry? Because my concern there is I see some that if they're not in the household, they don't have to even connect.
Right.
Maybe during holidays, special days, and they know they're going to be under the same roof.
Right.
That they really make an effort to put, past issues behind for the benefit of grandma and grandpa and the turkey dinner.
It's a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, as we've talked about, that developmental grief, like, it's a reminder that we're all going to be together again. And then that triggers some emotions from the past.
And then when they start having kids, it's what do they want their kids to see?
Right.
And what do they want them to remember?
Right.
So they can keep those things in mind.
It's a great point. So remember this in sibling rivalry: time, consistency, the birth order may change, and again, help the kids determine the pacing. Like Gina said, let them have ownership to defuse any sibling rivalry in your blended family. Thanks for listening today.
Be sure and follow us on our Facebook page and Instagram at Blended Together Forever.
And look for our upcoming events on our website and our resources, the books that we're working on at blendedtogether.org.